This is Donna. My partner and I rescued her, and we're coming up on 1 year anniversary of her being in our lives. So to commemorate that, I want to build her something special. Plus, a good excuse for me to make something. Now, unless I want my sofa destroyed, Donna tells me that she needs a cat scratcher. Now, we've tried cat scratchers and cat towers. They work, yeah, but they're really messy and they're just so ugly. Through shopping for pet furniture, here's what I've noticed. It always looks like pet furniture. That cat tree is always going to look like a cat tree. It comes with ropes, feathers, platforms. There's no mistaking it. To be fair, I have seen some exceptions. I've seen furniture makers who've tried to integrate furniture and the cat scratcher, but they always end up looking like cat scratcher first and furniture as an afterthought. But what if I don't want to compromise? What if furniture could be thoughtfully designed for both Donna and me? I'm taking inspiration from the American architect and visionary Frank Lloyd Wright. You might recognize some of his iconic work, like Falling Water House, which was built directly over a waterfall. This featured the cantilevered terrace that really blurred the line between architecture and nature. Or even the Johnson Wax building with its iconic lily pad office. This is where he brought to life his organic philosophy into the American workplace. Mr. Wright was also known to design the furnitures in all of his buildings, designing both the interior and the exterior as a cohesive and unified whole. Looking at all of his designs, he had a very clear design language where he strips away ornamental designs and instead focuses on the natural materials. Instead of hiding structural elements, he intentionally highlights them as features, just like the use of slats and thick panels used in building strong geometric shapes. So I've come up with two designs. This first piece is strongly inspired by Mr. Wright's side table, where I highlight its structure using the wide back panels and joinery with the legs. I then introduce more curves and roundovers to soften the overall look. For the second piece, I change the profile and create a sort of viewing point from the front. This design gives it a sense of openness because of the open sides, then creates a strong frontal view, sort of like a frame using the back panel and the legs. I think both of them are good designs, but ultimately I went with the second to build. Sorry, quick pause here. I completed building the second table, but I liked the design so much I went ahead and built the first one as well. So this video is still focused on building the second one, but stick around till the end and then you'll be able to see both of them. Alright, back to the video. So I'm starting on the back piece first. Here you see me marking out a rabbet joint, which is basically a groove at the end of the board. This groove will connect to the top shelf, which is the board you see horizontally. Once I've marked it out, I'll then come in with a miter saw to clear out most of the material, and then I'll clean it up with a router. By aligning the back piece to the board for the top shelf, I can then mark out the corresponding section for the rabbet joint that will be on the top shelf. I'll head over to the bandsaw and cut this section out. I usually cut the pieces just shy of the line so that I can come back in with a chisel to clean it up. I can then move on to working on the two front legs. Here you can see me marking out on the top shelf where the two front legs will connect to. I'll then make the legs by ripping down this larger board into size. I'll be connecting the two front legs to the top shelf by what I think still counts as a rabbet joint. I'm not sure. Other woodworkers can chime in, but it essentially works the same way. I'll be cutting these sections out on the bandsaw and the corresponding sections on the top shelf. So after rough cutting all the joints, I can now do a dry fit of the 3 pieces. The back piece, top shelf, and also the 2 front legs. This then gives me an idea of the space I need between the top shelf and the bottom shelf. For this, I actually measured the height of Donna, my cat, and added a couple of inches, assuming she's gonna prop herself up and start scratching the back piece. Here I'm cutting out what's called a dado on the back piece. The dado is basically a groove that another board will slot in. That board that will connect here will be the bottom shelf. By referencing where the dado is on the back piece, I can then transfer the same measurements over to the 2 front legs. I don't know if you can see it, but I made a mistake in this first cut. I ended up cutting this section a bit too wide, which you'll see later on, but it's not a difficult fix. So this is where you'll see the cut is way wider than my marking lines, which resulted in a big old gap in the joint. So to fix that, I just cut off a sliver of wood from one of the ends of the legs. I then take that piece and glue it up to the gap and secure it with tape. Once the glue dries up, I should be able to clean it up and make it all good. Now coming back to the top shelf, I'm now using a guide to get the rounded ends on both ends of the board. I'll first cut the bulk of the materials off with a bandsaw, and then I'll come back in with a router and a guide bit, plus using the guide as reference to get a cleaner finish. You know, in hindsight, I knew this was going to happen. Like, I've learned this lesson before. But I guess some lessons are just worth repeating. I think it looked worse than it actually was. The bulk of the tear out was still on the material that's outside of the line, so it didn't really dig deep into the wood. It's nothing a little bit of glue, tape, and pressure can't fix. Once I flip the board over and route it in the right direction, it's like you can't even see where it tore out. After that, it was pretty much smooth sailing. I made sure that both ends of the top shelf had curves and they were clean based on the guides. And then I moved on to make a second identical copy of the shelf for the bottom shelf. Once I've got all the pieces ready, I could do a quick dry fit. It starts looking good, and all I have to do now is to reduce the height because I kept the legs oversized. Once I've got those measured out and cut, it starts looking like the final product. Something that I find that really elevates furniture to something more sophisticated are rounded edges. So I'm back on the router to put a rounded edge on both the top shelf and the bottom shelf. I'm doing it in an inverse way, meaning on the top shelf, I will be rounding over the bottom edges, and on the bottom shelf, I'll be rounding over the top part of the shelf. Doing it this way, where I retain the sharp edges on the opposing side of both the shelves, gives it a lot more contrast and makes it a lot more visually interesting. Now this is the part where I make this side table become cat furniture. I'll be making a slot on the bottom shelf so that I can feed through and wrap the bottom section of the shelf in rope. That becomes a cat scratcher section for Donna. So I'm taking multiple passes at this, going a little bit deeper bit by bit at each pass until I've gone through and cleared the entire board. After that, I come back with a round over bit to soften up the edges of the slots. I also give the edges of the back piece a round over because this will be wrapped with rope as well. At this stage, I'm pretty much done and ready for glue up, but I'm going to sand it first because it's going to get a bit harder to sand once it's all glued up. Once the glue has dried, I then come in with a hand plane to plane down some of the high spots. I then come back in for final sanding. Now we're pretty much at the end of the project, and I bet a couple of you are wondering, What am I going to do about the mismatched boards? I'm going to blackwash it. I'm going to dilute black paint with mineral spirit, and once I've got a nice consistency, I'll paint over the wood and it will give it this nice black coat without being too opaque. You'll still be able to see and feel the textures of the wood grain. Once the paint has dried, I then come back in and give it a coat of boiled linseed oil.